show that they were here, so they were paying attention a little bit.
Cool.
Okay, so today we have Levi Larsen. What year did you graduate, Levi?
2019.
19. Okay, so
December of 19.
been a couple years. I'm going to let you kind of tell us the story, your path in terms of school. I just looked back and saw a triple major. Is that
Yeah,
right? Econ, finance, and international business.
that's correct. Yeah, it was a little unnecessary, to be honest. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and just kind of give my background. So I'm from Green River, Wyoming. I actually started my education at a community college called Western Wyoming Community College. It's a little tiny college in a little tiny town called Rock Springs. Did my first 2 years there, and I knew I was interested in business. But I had been interested in USU's Huntsman Scholar Program. I was also kind of interested in their ambassador program. And so I applied to USU. I got into the scholars program, not the ambassador program, and ended up coming to USU.
Which was an upgrade from Rock Springs, I'll have to say.
It's not really possible to go down from Rock Springs, Wyoming. So that's but so I triple majored in finance, econ, and international business. I mean, if we're being honest, the finance econ double major is a very convenient setup. It's pretty easy to get both of those, and your employers are none the wiser. So they think that you did a double major, and it was like really hard to get both, but it was quite easy to do the two together. And my interest in my undergrad was predominantly to go into the investing world. So I wanted to do investment banking. I wanted to do, private equity, venture capital, one of those things. And I was also, semi-interested in corporate finance. I did an internship for a company called Melaleuca. It's actually out of Idaho Falls, Idaho, in corporate finance, and I found it not challenging enough. So kind of shifted my focus towards investment banking and investing world. The summer of my junior year, after the summer of my junior year, whichever that is, I interned at Goldman Sachs. I interned in the private wealth management operations department. And that was a very informative experience for me because I walked away from it actually not wanting to go into investment banking or back to Goldman Sachs. I was extended an offer, but I ended up saying no. And I did that partially because, again, I felt like I wasn't super challenged by the specific work that my group was doing, but also because I had just gotten engaged at the time and started to weigh different priorities, like how much time I wanted to spend with my spouse. So I then had to make this kind of weird decision, which was, well, if I'm not going to go into investment banking or in this world, like what the heck do I do? Because I don't really want to do corporate finance. I ended up going into more or less what I do now, which is economic analysis or maybe more quantitative financial analysis. I worked for a company called Thermo Fisher Scientific. I had somebody randomly reach out to me on LinkedIn. And they just said like, hey, we need somebody to come in and learn how to model the cost of building vaccine and drug plants. It cost about $500 million and they're really expensive and we don't know how to do it. So would you come in and like do an internship for us and like just do this? And I said, sure, what the heck? I went and did that for about a year, really liked it, and said, you know what, maybe I do want to kind of go into econ. So at that time, my wife and I both applied to master's degrees, and we wanted to go live in Europe. That was our goal, or in the UK. So we applied everywhere we could and ended up both getting into the University of Edinburgh up in Scotland. So we moved up to Scotland in the middle of the pandemic, which was terrible and awesome at the same time. They had very strict lockdown measurements, which meant that there were a lot of things we couldn't do, but we got to live in this like huge tourist city alone. We lived right next to the castle and it was kind of just ours. Like there was nobody there. So it was pretty sick, but it was hard. So I did that for a year. I got my master's in financial economics at University of Edinburgh. And then I kind of had to figure out what I was going to do with that. So I called up the head of the biotech group at Thermo Fisher Scientific and just said, hey, I know that you guys, I worked for you before. I know that you guys saw my work and that you liked it. You should make a role for me as an economist or an economic analyst on your team. What do you say? And they came back and said, yeah, we liked your work. Sure. We don't really know where to put you, but we'll figure it out. And so I ended up getting put back into Thermo Fisher doing the same thing as kind of like this lone economist or economic analyst dude. And I did that for another year. Again, that was very like, we're looking at modeling, not really cash flows per se, but like quasi pro formas. We're looking at trying to understand how do you make drugs like in a scientifically sound way, but then more importantly, in a way that makes you money, right? Because we had to sell to these companies and convince them that our technology would not only make their vaccines and their drugs better, but it would make them more money or make them money more efficiently. I did that for about a year. And
So
then
what is, I mean, that's obviously a complicated
yeah,
topic. I
what does that
mean,
mean?
are you thinking of it like you said, kind of quasi pro formas, quasi cash flows? I mean, you could think of it kind of like an option to some extent, like some of these are going to pay off big and some of them aren't going to pay off at all. Like, how did you guys think about it when you were doing that modeling?
Yeah, so I ended up learning a niche software called Biosolve. But the software married the science and the business aspect of biotech. So you'd have to, there's like, let's say there's 12 steps into making, say, the COVID vaccine. And each of those steps is a specific type of technology associated with it. Maybe you're filtering it, maybe you're growing something, et cetera. And there's costs associated with each of those technologies. And so what we would do is say, what is the upfront cost to building a facility? We'd model out from a plot of land to your big giant facility. And then we would say, given all these steps, what are your operating costs? And if I sub in technology A in a specific step, maybe I use this, this might be too complicated, but maybe I use a centrifuge, which spins my product versus a filter, which just you run the product through and it filters it out. How might that save me more money? Would it mean I have a higher upfront capital cost? Would it mean I have a lower operating cost? What does that look like? And you would essentially create what I would call cost curves. And so you'd model out, hey, company XYZ, you need to produce 20,000 kilograms of drug and you need to make it for 20 years. Well, if you use this technology, this is how your cost curve is going to look. And if you use our technology, it's actually less expensive for you, right? Or you need to make 100,000 kilograms of drug. Well, our technology might not be optimal there. So it was, we didn't get into cash flows per se, but it was revenue and, well, it wasn't even revenue. It was just cost estimation, right? We were just seeing how much does it cost to run these processes? And if you do them differently, how does that fundamentally change the costs associated with them, upfront operational costs? And then making sure that it was scientifically sound, like it had to actually produce the drug in a way that regulators would like and that wouldn't get the patients sick or anything. Does that make sense, Ryan?
Yeah, that does make sense. But I mean, there's a lot of unknowns there, obviously, right? That's kind of fun in terms
Yeah.
of trying to figure some of this stuff out. And you think about it, just even that piece of, one piece, okay, we're going to make this building, that by itself is a full finance job, right? Okay, let's figure out how to make this building work on this land and get it entitled and all that stuff. And that's just one piece of the puzzle for you guys in terms of that whole process.
Yep. So I did that style of work with Thermo Fisher for about a year. And the second time I came back, it kind of morphed. So about 75% of the time I was doing this financial modeling, but 25% of the time I was actually doing more writing and marketing. So you can produce like really cool financial analysis and really cool scientific analysis. But if you can't sell it to somebody, it's pretty useless. And so my job was to take our findings and write them up into what we call white papers, which is essentially like a non-peer reviewed paper that a company publishes. And we would use those white papers to go to a CEO or a CFO of a pharma company and say, hey, when you build your next drug facility, this is why you should use our technology. So 25% of the time I was actually learning how to take the information that I modeled and put it in a form that was both convincing but succinct. Like it had to be condensed into a language that was understandable for somebody that works in the C-suite, who doesn't really care about these super intricate details. They care about big picture things. And it was crafting those messages for our sales team to then take out and sell to our customers.
That's super nice. Just as a side note, we often talk about, there's all this talk about AI and all the things that AI can do. And really that kind of synthesis, I mean, there's so much that's going on there that, at least nowhere in the near future is AI going to be doing that type of job. Like it's not just about spitting out the numbers, doing the analysis, even kind of writing. It's the interpretation. It's understanding how that is and understanding all those different moving parts and how it's going to affect other things, and then boiling it down in a way that you can, communicate it to another human that's going to have to make a decision based on that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to talk about in a little bit, but I just want to touch on it quickly. Like your ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes is like huge in the workforce. Your ability to stop being a financial analyst or an economic analyst and instead be a CEO or a CMO or somebody who's making a purchase, and to understand their needs and how you can craft your analysis or your message to their needs is massive. Because if you don't understand how to craft your message, it sometimes it doesn't even matter how good your analysis is, because you really have to understand what they care about and how to deliver it in that fashion. So I did that with Thermo for about a year. That involved a lot of data analysis. I wrote several papers. I actually went and spoke at a big biotech conference last year, and presented on some of the research we did. But then I ended up feeling like my career progression. Oh, does Kaya, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, Kaya Green, do you have a question? Maybe not. I thought I saw a hand up.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, just chime in. This is hard with this many people on Zoom. So if there is a question, feel free to chime in, or like I said, you can shoot it to me and I can do it through the chat and go that way as well. So
yeah, please, anybody and everybody ask any questions you want. But I ended up kind of feeling like, hey, I can't get the career progression I want here. I like what I do, but the chance of me getting promoted and the time frame I want to be promoted in was just not very likely. So I had a really upfront, honest conversation with my manager and said, hey, when I hit a year mark, if we can't have a legitimate conversation about my promotion, assuming I meet these goals, I'm going to look for a new job. And that came around, and I hit those goals and they couldn't do it. So I looked for another job and ended up finding the job that I'm in now, which is working for the Idaho National Laboratory, the INL, up in the thriving metropolis of Idaho Falls, Idaho. So here I am an energy economist. Specifically, I'm a nuclear energy economist, but almost everything at the INL is nuclear. So sometimes you don't need to include that. What I do here is support the advancement of nuclear technology in helping prove out economic use cases. So if you grew up in the Mountain West region, there's no nuclear power plants over here. There will be soon. There's one in Wyoming and there's a new one in Idaho being built. But you probably haven't heard much about it. And since there's been a lot of really like high profile disasters, the apprehension around people adopting nuclear technology is super high. Like people they're not about that. Now, the war in Ukraine and just like general need for the country to have energy independence has pushed us into this area where we're saying, well, okay, maybe we don't want to entirely rely on oil, or maybe we want to have a diversified energy portfolio. So the INL is a research laboratory that helps advance the goal of using more nuclear technology, but we have to convince private companies to build nuclear power plants. They have to know that they're going to have a return on an investment for them to take on that much risk. So my team will say, hey, we're developing a new nuclear reactor. how might this new nuclear reactor produce energy more efficiently? How might it be able to produce it at a lower price? Can it serve a really niche population, i.e., a good example is they're building these tiny nuclear reactors that can fit in semi trucks. And hypothetically, you could drive that out to, say, a really remote area in Alaska that has huge problems having consistent power. And you could power the entire town out of this semi truck. Or there's a large disaster, say in Turkey, and their energy grid goes down. You could drive in one of these micro reactors and power a certain subsection of the city. So our job is to help show how there's economic use cases for these advancements in technology, but also our job is to help make energy more cost efficient. So understand where are there levers that we can pull that makes nuclear cheaper or less expensive. And I've done that for about 5 weeks. So if we're being brutally honest, I don't actually know that much about it, but I can talk like I do. Okay. That was a very long description of my background. I've got a few, I went through the topics. Ryan, do you want me to just go ahead and
just dive in whatever
Okay.
you think. So I mean, what we want you to do is just tell students what you think they need to know, what would help them, and just have a conversation about
Okay.
kind of your career path. And so that's a great setup in terms of giving us an idea of kind of where you've been and where you're headed.
Okay, now that you know my life story, everybody, do you have any questions about the life of Levi Larsen? You want to know what product I use in my curly mustache? Anything? No.
I do. Now that you say it.
Grave before shave. That's
Okay.
it. It's
That's
quality.
it. Got it.
Okay, no questions. I'll talk about a few things. So one of the things I want to emphasize with you is so first and foremost, like, oh, Logan, you're gonna ask about my beard products next, aren't you? What do you got for me, Logan?
Yeah, I was just kidding. No. But I have a question about, you said you did investment banking, and I'm currently doing an investment banking internship right now. And so far, it's been good experience, but honestly, it's been kind of boring. And I also think that's also just because it's an entry level internship. Maybe it's not giving me a good, I guess, taste of what investment banking really is. But I wanted to ask if, like, kind of what specifically there was in investment banking that led you to not go down that pathway.
Yeah, that's a great question, Logan. So I did not intern in the investment banking group at Goldman Sachs. It's a key differentiation. I interned in the private wealth management operations. So if I'm going to be, I'll be a little brutally honest with everybody here. Interning at Goldman Sachs is like incredible, awesome. You should never look down on that. Like the fact that I was able to get that internship, I was super grateful for. Operations was, honestly speaking, kind of bottom of the totem pole, right? So I was not doing the sexy stuff that you see people doing in investment banking. And the thing that turned me off was the style of work that I saw people doing from an entry-level analyst to, say, a manager. Was pretty mundane, and it was things that were not challenging intellectually. So one of the guys, his job was to verify signatures when somebody cleared a really huge amount on their account. So let's say Elon Musk transferred $5 million out of his head of his GS account. He had to look at the signature on the transfer and make sure that that actually was Elon Musk's signature. And he did that for like 10 hours or something a day. He made good money doing it, and he had Goldman Sachs, awesome name on his resume. But for me, I was like, I did not just get 3 majors to do that. And so that's what was hard for me. I will say this, Logan, any position that you take in any company, in any industry, as an entry-level person, they're going to give you the tasks that they don't want to do. That's just kind of the reality of being an entry-level person. So you have to pay, in 99% of any positions in any industry, you have to pay your dues. What you need to do is look at what the people maybe above you are doing and say, oh, is that interesting to me? So maybe you don't like the really boring model building or data cleaning you have to do for the other IB analysts, but do you like what the senior analysts are doing, or the associates are doing, or the VP is doing? That's a key thing for you to key on, to notice, and then ask yourself, okay, am I willing to bite the bullet for 1 or 2 years so that I can do that? For me, that was not worth it for me, and that's why I steered away. And it was also kind of a life decision in terms of, how much time I wanted to spend working versus with my family. Does that answer that question, Logan?
That really does. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well in terms of looking ahead in terms of what does that career progression look like, and what are the time markers? Is it 1 or 2 years, or is it 4 or 5 years? And do you want to get to the third step, which is if it's 4 or 5 years per step, then it's 15 years.
Yeah,
That's a long time to wait to do what you want. So I think those are things to keep in mind as you're doing internships and as you're looking at some of these career tracks is, okay, what's the average length in each position, and which position do you really want to get to, and why? What is it about that position that really excites you? Because if it's just the money, if it's just something else, that in the end, that's generally not worth it. Doing something you hate every day for years, not a great career choice in my mind.
yeah. It's you can make great money, but if you work so much that you don't have time to spend the money, it sucks. because then you can't do the fun things with the money you want to do. Thanks for that question, Logan. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. So one of the key things I want to talk to you guys about is some of the skills and the things that you should look for and develop now as you're searching for your career. And so let me walk you through what my typical day looks like. And a lot of what my typical day looks like is going to be similar for any industry. So I would break my day down into about 5 tasks. So one is going to be communicating. I'm going to spend the day writing emails, sending messages, showing up to meetings. Like I will spend 20% of my day, sometimes 50% of my day, on really bad days, 100% of my day in meetings. Other things I have to do is reading. For my role, this might be a little bit more common than for other industries, but I have to read books, have to read papers to understand industries better. This might sound shocking to some of you, but I'm actually in the middle of reading a math textbook for work. There's a specific type of analysis that I'm learning, and so I'm literally reading a math textbook, which I didn't even do in college. Data work. I have to work on data and predominantly Excel. But spend time manipulating data, cleaning data, drawing insights from data. And
Where are you
then the
getting your data
last,
from?
anywhere I can. A lot of my data will come. So some of the data will come from private industries. Some of it will be internally generated. Sometimes it's like the Federal Reserve. Anywhere I can get it, that is a good source. But where you find data is sometimes where you spend a lot of your time. I wish I could spend like 90% of my time like in Excel with headphones on, listening to heavy metal music, just like going ham, because that's what I love to do. But about it's like 70% of my time is spent scouring Google Scholar and Google for data. And that's a really important skill is how to research and find data. The last 2 things I spend my time on is writing. Obviously like writing emails and stuff, but writing down, for me, it's writing papers. Sometimes it's writing synopses of analysis, building slide decks. And the last thing is project management and position management. So being able to manage your time and understand when to allocate time to a certain project, or when to allocate time to certain things that I want to achieve in my role. Those are some of the key things. So
Give me an idea of weights. So, I mean, because you think about
Cool.
communicating via email and communicating with slide decks and other things, written documents, memos, white papers, like what 50% in the data, 20% in the data,
yeah,
50% writing. I mean, how would you kind of just give me a ballpark?
yeah, it ebbs and flows, but like on a project, I will spend, say, like 5 to 6 months gathering data and modeling data. And then I'll spend like 3 months getting that into a slide deck. or 3 slide decks or 4 slide decks, which will also overlap with some writing. You would be surprised, like one of the biggest, when I do work, I oftentimes will finish my analysis and then start to put it in like a PowerPoint, and then realize that I don't have the right stuff. Like I'll realize like, oh, the CEO doesn't care about the flow rate of filters. I need to kick that out and find something else, right? So, I mean, I don't have a good answer for you, Ryan. I'd love to say it's like 20% across the board.
Yeah.
But
But
in an
that
idea,
varies. Yeah, that
yeah.
gives me an idea though, in terms of,
But
and-
yeah, go ahead. Oh, I like your job is going to be more so like, I'm going to go really hard on something for 2 or 3 days, and then I'm going to transition. It's less like I'm going to spend 20% of each day. It's going to, for me, it's like, all right, this day I'm going to do a ton of reading. And then the last couple hours, I'm going to focus on maybe like emails or some data work. And then tomorrow I'm going to start building out my slide deck, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on that. You tend to pocket your time together, because the longer I do something, the more productive I am at it. So it's kind of what that looks like.
Hey, one other question here. Someone asked in terms of the science background, like, do you feel like you, because you're going really scientific in terms of some of these jobs, probably having to play catch up a little bit in terms of the science and whatnot, how, do you wish you would have done something a little bit differently in undergrad, or how's that worked out in terms of catching up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, when I got into biotech, it was horrifying, because like I avoided biology like the plague in high school, and like never took any science classes in college.
No pun intended there,
Yeah. Well, there you go.
huh?
I actually don't wish I would have done that. And the reason why is because you are so capable of teaching yourself the stuff you need to teach. Let's be honest, like if society functioned perfectly, we could not have to have colleges, and we could all just like learn our own stuff and trust each other's like skill sets on resumes. But for me, it was about like, my employers felt like they could teach me the science better than they could teach a science person the finance or the economics. That's what it came down to. And for me, that was pretty straightforward. I liked learning, and I liked trying to gather those skill sets. But that wasn't a problem for me, because I knew that the skill sets that I had developed in terms of analysis and data work, it was just a lot harder for them to teach an engineer that than it was to take an economist and explain to them the fundamentals of drug creation, or the nuclear energy systems. Does that answer that question, Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think another point to maybe make there is, predicting which area you're going to be in. I mean, yeah, you could have done physics, you could have done biology, you could have done chemistry, biochem, right? I mean, there's all these different areas, and unless you really know exactly what you want to do and which industry you want to be in, then you're going to be learning on the job to some extent anyway, as you transition across some of these different sciences, across some of these different industries. And so I think that's where, if you know exactly what you want to do, yeah, you can kind of do some of that because you enjoy it and you really have some direction from the get-go. But if not, some of those things are going to be learned on the fly no matter what.
Yeah. And what is the most powerful tool you use for your data analysis? Data Excel. So Michelle, I am trained in Stata in my master's degree. Unfortunately, Stata is pretty niche to academia. There's not a lot of people that use Stata outside of academia, partially just because you got to pay for it. I use predominantly Excel right now. I'm in the process of trying to apply more Python and R. But if I were to tell you, like, what are the languages you should learn? Everybody will tell you different languages. But in my opinion, if I had gone back to my undergrad, I would still learn a lot of Excel. There's so much stuff you can do in Excel really quick, just like quick and dirty analysis where you don't need to overcomplicate things. But I would have spent more time in R. If I knew I was going to work with stats, or I knew I was going to have to do calculus, I would have spent more time in RStudio, and I would have spent more time in Python. I have gotten very creative with working around the limitations of Excel to perform my analysis because Stata is not that used in industry. But my advice to you would say, learn the open source platforms. So R and Python are just really, really awesome. And when I was interning at Goldman, that was one of the things I kept hearing people saying is, gosh, we just want somebody that knows like Python, but like nobody knows it, right? So those are some of the things that I would key in on.
It's funny. I mean, obviously there are more uses, but I think it really depends on the data set and the type of project you're working on. So from the investment, maybe not, yeah, investment banking, private equity, real estate, a whole bunch of these areas, we just hear back Excel. We need more Excel because every job is, every analysis you're doing, everything, every investment is a one-off. It's, you've got to model it from the ground up for the most part, and you can't kind of bring in big swaths of data to do the analysis. Now, if you're doing something different where you're looking at the whole, nuclear landscape, the whole industry, right? Then all of a sudden you can do some of these things with these more sophisticated tools. But it really depends on kind of which question you're trying to answer. If you're trying to answer a very specific question, is this company a good deal? Is this company worth investing in? You're using Excel. You can't almost, you have all these Python skills and it's not going to do you any good. Now, once you say, okay, I have 1,000 companies, I want to look at some analysis on across 1,000 companies, then that stuff becomes very powerful. But I think people get confused. Sometimes you get caught up in, oh, these languages, the sexiness of some of this data analytics. And in reality, it just really depends on the job. I mean, some jobs, you're just crunching through data and you do need those tools because that's what you're doing. In my mind, the interesting part is, okay, how do we actually do the analysis? How do we think about this? And how do we create something that's more, creative almost in the process of figuring it out?
Yeah, people will get a little elitist. Like I've got a coworker who exclusively works in Python, and he's like, I'll never use Excel, blah blah blah. And like I can do stuff way faster than him in Excel. Then he can do certain things in Python. And like it's just, I think sometimes people get a little caught up in like, oh, I only use this language. No, just learn how to apply the tool to the job, and then you'll be really successful.
And some employers are just going to say, this is what we use. They might have their own custom software. So you don't use Excel or Python or anything else. And they're going to say, here's what we use. This is what we do for our analysis. So I think it's easy to get kind of lost in the weeds sometimes with some of those programs.
Yeah. Michelle, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm in my econometrics class and we use a lot of, it's Mitchell.
Oh, bro, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Happens all the time. Yeah, I'm in my econometrics class and we use Stata a lot, and I like it, but I didn't know if it was really all that widely used or.
So here's the thing about sorry to interrupt you there, Mitchell. Those languages, like the difference between Python and Stata and R is literally just syntax. Like an if loop or a for loop is the same in all of them fundamentally. It's just how you tell Stata or Python to do a for loop or an if loop is different. And so once you learn one of those languages, your ability to learn the next language increases exponentially. So it's good for you to learn anything because you're learning how to speak computer or you're learning how to speak data. And then it makes learning the next one that much easier. But yeah, I mean, I used in my master's, my thesis was exclusively done in Stata. And, we used really, really, really big data sets for that. And Stata was the right tool for it. I tried to use Excel at first and I crashed my very nice computer like over and over again because Excel was not built for that. So I had to do it in Stata. So the next thing that I want to bring up, and Ryan, give me a time check here.
Yeah, I'll let you know. We've got another 20 plus minutes, so we're good. So
the next thing I wanted to kind of touch on, I think is just important to understand hard and soft skills that you need in the workforce. And I'll start with hard skills and then kind of dive into soft skills in a little bit more depth. But in terms of hard skills, the stuff that has been most useful for me is first and foremost my ability to work data in any application, kind of what we just talked about, right? Like I am comfortable with somebody saying, here's a bunch of data, extract insight from it. I know how to like filter data. I know how to clean data. I know how to pull just specific bands of data. Like my ability and my comfort around handling data sets has gone so far for me. In my last job at Thermo Fisher, sometimes I felt like they cared less that I was a good economist or a good financial analyst, and more that just like I was fast with data. They could hand me something and I knew exactly how to pull out what they wanted. That goes a long way because it's about time savings. If I can get into a data set and extract something quickly, maybe I can do that in 2 hours versus somebody else that takes like 2 days. That's pretty big. I'm saving a ton of time, and then it means that they can get answers quicker. Data visualization is just as big. So I can take a data set and extract these insights from that. But I spend like 8 hours staring at this data. So like I live in the data, I know the data, the insights make sense to me. But then I have to be able to take that and give it to somebody that did not just spend 8 hours looking at it and get them to have the same reaction or synthesize the same information that I synthesized in that 8 or 10 hours. And data visualization is key to that, understanding what types of visuals help you communicate certain messages, when to use a bar graph, when to use a line graph, when to use a pie chart, how to incorporate unique styles of data visualization to communicate the right messages is just as big as pulling out the message itself. And that's gone a long way for me. And then the last thing is just writing. Again, my role is a little bit more research based. So anything that I do ultimately ends up written up in a paper, a white paper or a peer reviewed paper. And so my ability to write is huge. But I would say in any job, the easier it is for you to take data, create an awesome visual, but then synthesize it down into 1, 2, 3 points. Again, is big for you to be able to communicate the messages from the insights that you draw. So learn how to visualize something, how to write about it, and how to do it in a succinct manner. In terms of soft skills, some of the key things that I would touch on. The first thing that I would stress is you need to learn how to accept feedback, how to be wrong, and how to be right without having big emotions. Now, what I'm not saying is emotions are bad. Emotions are like super important, and you need to learn how to feel those in the workforce. But what you do need to learn how to do is have someone say, maybe not in a nice way, that is crap, I don't like that. And for you not to immediately get super defensive and be like, well, you're crap, I don't like you. That is hard, right? You also need to learn how to tell somebody like, hey, I don't think the approach that you took was right, but I do think it was good, and here's how I would change things. The really effective communicators that I've worked with that are people that have been able to advance their careers. Maybe I should transpose those. The people that have advanced their careers are the ones that have been really good communicators. They know how to sit someone down and disagree with them and not have the meeting end with that person just hating them, right? They know how to sit down and accept criticism and say, okay, what has this person said that might actually have some merit, and how might I need to change my approach to something? And they know how to do that without showing really, really big emotions or getting caught up in the moment. That is really hard for me. I'm a ginger. I got red hair, and I think I'm a little bit more prone to some of those bigger emotional reactions. But it has paid dividends, because ultimately what that has done is it's helped me make more friends in the workforce. People that I could have pissed off actually really appreciate the feedback that I give them. And people that give me feedback have a lot more respect if I'm willing to take that and be like, you know what, I think you are right. Let me try and work on that. And the amount of friends you make in the workforce is almost like directly correlated to your ability to get promoted. It's huge. So learning how to be wrong, learning how to be right, and to push your point without being, overly aggressive, those are really big. The other things in terms of soft skills, I would say, is learn how to research and be efficient at it. And it's always like a weird thing when people say that, but it's like, learn how to be really good at finding answers on Google and verifying them, or getting on Google Scholar. Learn where you go to find information. I was talking to one of the senior economists at the INL where I work, and he was saying that, like, being able to do something that takes 10 hours in 2 is huge, because you're constantly doing new research on things. Chat GPT is probably going to save me some time in my life, right? Like learning how to leverage tools. Am I going to cite Chat GPT as a source? No, but, and maybe Professor Whitby is going to disagree with me on this, but like, at least don't use it to cheat, people. But like, I have to do a project. So one of the projects, one of the projects that I can talk about is we're learning how to produce hydrogen from nuclear power plants, right? It's kind of this crazy concept. You like produce hydrogen out of thin air, right? I had to, like, I don't know anything about hydrogen markets. So I had to go and Google and just like read a crap ton of papers, and it was mind numbing, but I had to do it so that I could then understand, great, where is the supply and demand in hydrogen markets? Like what spot price is hydrogen trading at, et cetera, et cetera. Learning how to research and leverage your research tools is big, because it increases your ability to become an expert on something faster. And the quicker you can become experts on topics, the way more dangerous you are on any kind of analysis. So learn how to research. The last 2 things, I kind of already touched on this, but learn how to distill large complex concepts into something that's easy to digest. We've talked about that a lot, but it's just really important. You will spend a lot of time in your work learning how to distill things into, quick and fast information for somebody. And then the last thing I would touch on is learn how to step into someone else's shoes. I mentioned this earlier in terms of learn how to like be a CEO, learn how to be a CMO, learn how to be somebody that's making a purchase decision. But I think in terms of soft skills, it extends beyond that. And a good example of this is learning when you can and cannot push your coworkers. I was on a project about a year ago where we wrote this paper about this newly developed product. And we had spent several months writing the paper, thought it was awesome, and we sent it out to review. And for some reason, one of the people that was reviewing it like just hated it and told us to rewrite it. And it was basically, okay, great, you have 2 days to rewrite this whole thing that took you a couple months. And the writer that I was working with, I worked specifically with a writer who helped me do this. She took it pretty bad, and it was really hard for her because she had put a lot of effort into that, and this person was not super respectful to all of her effort. And we sat down and had a chat afterwards, and she was like, look, I can't write this. I feel like crap. I am not in a good mental space right now. I can't work on this. And there were 2 things that went through my head. There was the side of me that wanted to say, her name's Kayla, and we're actually really good friends now. Kayla, that sucks, but you got to suck it up and write the paper, right? Then there was another part of me that was like, well, if Kayla doesn't feel like she's in the right mental space to write this, she's not going to produce good work. So I need to tell her to take a break. And thankfully, I chose the latter of the 2 and said, you know what, Kayla, I get that you're not in a good space. Take the rest of the day off and let's like hit this hard tomorrow, right? I will pick up the slack for you today, so that you can just take a break from this really stress-inducing thing. We were able to get the paper done. I had to lift more on my end on that project, but later on, Kayla recognized that and she picked up my slack in other areas. As a coworker, your ability to step into someone else's shoes and understand like when they're overwhelmed, when they're overworked, when they need help on something, and especially when they need to just step away and like recover. That's so big. It's going to help you make friends, but more importantly, it's going to help you develop relationships where people are going to want to do the same for you. And so like learning how to humanize the people you work around is big. And that also means it means learning how to understand you all have the same purpose. It can be a little cutthroat in certain industries, and it can be a little competitive. And maybe some people get really upset about something you've done, but learning how to just be like, hey, we all work for the same company, and our ultimate goal is to sell a bunch of this product so we can be chill with each other. That's really important. That's something that I would definitely learn how to do. So I'm going to pause there. I don't know how much time we have left before I talk about anything else. Does anyone have any questions about the stuff that I've brought up? It's okay if you don't.
Yeah, just a little comment on that as well. When you're talking about data visualizations and boiling it down, all those things, in my mind, it almost comes down to storytelling. Like, how are you going to tell the story? How are you going to convince somebody that you know what you're talking about, that you're doing the right thing, that it's a good product? I mean, there's all these different ways of looking at it, but I see too many people, once again, they get lost in the weeds of the visualization, and it's super fancy. It's got 12 colors and everything else. And you don't understand, in a sentence, what does this mean? What is this telling me? And then that's why lots of times I'll do, big data work in SAS. I'll do regressions and other things in Stata, because that's where that excels. And then in Excel, I'll just dump the results in, and I can table it, and I can put it in a visualization, a graph, a pie chart, whatever. Super easy, and it can be something that I know exactly what the story is. Here's the punchline. We went through time, things changed. Then we see, a lower trend, or we see something else. And so I think it's easy to forget, okay, the story, what's the point here? And if you keep that in mind as you're doing all those different pieces, that's super helpful. And then I think the advice of, don't get caught up with your own ego, right? Don't have a huge ego, and don't be a jackass. I mean, that's pretty good advice across the board. You can easily be someone that no one wants to be around, even if you're smart, even if you're talented, whatever, and things aren't going to go well. So
yeah, I like be somebody that other people want to work with. It's like, it's just, and then guess what? They do you favors more. I went out of my way to try and pick up Slack where I thought Slack existed on my last team at Thermo Fisher. And then when the crap hit the fan in my life, or when something happened, other people were just like, oh yeah, no, Levi, I will do this for you. Or like, oh, you know what? It's this big, long process, but I will shorten it for you because I know that you've taken time to care about me. It really goes a long way. And quite frankly, like when you step away from a career, like all of us just want to be happy and do things we like, and just like learn how to see people as people and not as like a corporate entity or
numbers,
somebody.
right? Yeah, it's
like,
easy to see it that. I think that's so much of today's work is in groups. Even if you're not in a formal group, you're working with other people, you're working across industries, across companies. And so, yeah, that social component is as big as ever today. Yeah,
I noticed that Dallin asked a question. What is the biggest thing you credit your success to? I'm flattered that you think I'm successful, Dallin. I don't know that I would label it as that, but I think a big thing that has been helpful for me in life is to learn how to create opportunities for myself. So I sat down with one of the econ professors once. I don't know if he's still there.
Who?
Oh, what's his name? I forgot his name. He's the guy that's he worked for Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund. What's his name?
Oh,
TJ. Yeah.
Yeah.
I sat down with him once.
Yeah, he's actually on leave. He took the last 2 years on leave. He's working for the Qatari Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Oh, that's why he's not responding to my emails.
Yeah.
What the heck? He's a cool guy, but I sat down with him once and I was like, look, TJ, I'm not at Harvard. Like I go to USU and I have a lot of pride in my school, but let's be honest, on paper, I'm going to try and go up against some of these people that are like Harvard applicants, and it's, I don't know, like, I don't know what to do to try and compete with them. I know I'm smarter than some of them. Like, I remember outworking people that went to significantly better schools than me in some of my internships and making them look bad. But on paper, it just, that was not reflected. And we had this conversation, and he just talked a lot about how, like, you need to learn how to create opportunities for yourself. And so one of the things that's helped me is to go out and do that. I have this like weird side business I do that I started in my undergrad, where I consult UPS store owners that want to acquire new stores. I go and do like DCF cash flow models, or abbreviated DCF cash flow models for them, to help them understand if the acquisition of a new store is a big thing. And in relative terms, it's like really small purchases. We're talking like maybe $1 million, maybe $500,000. In the world of investing, that's like nothing. But I was like, okay, I'd managed a UPS store. I think I can go and do this. And I built up this kind of side hustle that A, made me cash, but B, it was this unique thing that I could put on my resume that I knew other people hadn't done. Like, you're not doing your own private consulting. And the other thing I think is learning how to be bold and just like ask for stuff. The reason I got my second job at Thermo was because I went back and was like, you should create a position. They didn't have one posted, but I wanted them to. So I went and asked them to. And the worst case scenario is they were going to say no. And that would suck for a day or two, but then I would move on. The same thing happened in my master's degree. There was an investing firm in the University in Edinburgh that I wanted to work for, and they didn't have a position. And so I just emailed the CEO and was like, hey, I want to work for you. I mean, I'd prefer it wasn't for free, but like, could you do something? Like, could you maybe make an internship for me and pay me like a little bit? And they were like, sure, if you go take a Python class online, we'll make a position for you. So like, learning how to just go out there and be bold, and like, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and to try things. I feel like that helped me overcome some of the hurdles, which was making myself look different on paper, because I knew I was going to be viewed a certain way.
Look, I think we have Aggies tend to do fantastic. They get on the job, they put their head down, they work, they're humble, like all these fantastic things, and the employers want more of them. The one feedback we get is, yeah, they're sometimes not as polished, other things. Okay, we can work on that a little bit, but realizing that your education is as good as anybody else's, that your abilities are as good as anybody else's, and just going out and doing it. And then look, if you're at a company that is valuing just what's on paper that much, then that might not be a great fit. Like, do you really want to work for somebody that's only worried about a pedigree? I don't. And I don't, I would say, that's going to be a bad environment anyway. But generally, even, the biggest firms will come back and have, want more Aggies because of those reasons, because they'll just get to work and get things done.
Yeah, your work ethic will do so much for you. Like, this is a funny side note, but like, we had to do a service project at Goldman Sachs, and we had to go dig holes for something. And I was digging holes, and there were a bunch of kids from like New York and stuff, and they were like, "Oh man, have you dug holes before? Like, you're good at this." And I was like, "Yeah, I've dug holes before." And that doesn't actually say anything about them as a person, but I liked to think that I had done a little bit more hard work than them in my life, and that I knew that did pay off on the job. Like, my ability to put my head down and work hard just said mountains more than some people that maybe thought they could write it off by just having a degree from a certain place. 2 + 2 is still 4 at Harvard. Like, the calculation for IRR is still the same as at Harvard as it is at USU. They're not learning anything unique than you. I'll touch on this. I saw one other question that I'll mention really quickly. Derek Christensen asked, what has been your greatest regret since entering this field? It's probably that I have not tried to. So two. One is that I haven't spent more time developing computer science skills. I probably would have gone back and gotten like a CS minor, just because like everything comes back to computer science or math. But I'm doing a good job of retrospectively filling my math gaps. And then I think the other thing is just like, sometimes I think I spent too much time focusing on trying to be successful. Like in college, I went to school full time year round, including the summers, because I was trying to triple major, and I worked almost full time, like for the whole time. And I wouldn't have done that. I would have spent more time like doing fun things. Like I still made it to Aggie football games and basketball games and stuff, but like when I'm a happy person, my analysis is so much better, which is kind of weird to think about. But like when I take time to, whether it's go to the gym or play video games or go hang out with my brothers and go like, canyoneering or something, like when I do that stuff, I actually produce a lot better analysis. And so I wish I would have taught myself that earlier, how to find the balance between doing the things that I love that can make me happy and balance my happiness and striving for success. Because you'll go through school and you'll feel like I have to go to school and work and do nothing but. And it comes at costs. From a health perspective, like I worked myself into a very unhealthy place in my undergrad and my grad program because the only thing I could think about was school. From a mental health perspective, like learn how to balance those things. And I wish I would have learned that so much sooner, because now I'm painfully trying to go back and relearn that. And that's not fun. And you can do that now as an undergrad student.
I think sometimes people get into such a hurry to do that next thing that, yeah, I mean, you're going to be in a job, you're going to be doing some of these things, it's not necessarily a race. It's, enjoy the journey a little bit as well. So that's great advice. Hey, we're just about out of time. Any last thoughts, any other advice you'd like to impart on our young Aggies?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that I have anything specific. I mean, I think that like, look, I would never just don't ever discount yourself, fam. Like, just don't ever discount yourself. Don't ever care about where you went to school or where you grew up or the internships you had. Like, stop making decisions for others in advance. There are so many people that I've heard say like, oh, I can't apply for that job, I don't have this. Yeah, don't make the decision for the hiring manager that you're not qualified. So like always just go out and strive to be and do what you want, and stop making the decision for others that you aren't qualified for something, because that's dumb and that's their job. So don't do their job for them. Be what you want to be and strive to do those things. It really does pay off, and you'll get things that you didn't think you were going to get. This job that I'm in right now I don't think I'm qualified for what I do or the pay that's associated with it, but I got it. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to work to be qualified for it. And so don't hesitate to do that.
Yeah, hey, that's fantastic. Fantastic advice. Life advice, not just career advice. That's good life advice. Hey, thanks everybody for being here, participating. Thank you so much, Levi. This was fantastic to catch up a little bit and hear about all your new adventures and let you get back a little bit to the students in terms of some advice. So really do appreciate it. I assume if other questions, they could reach out, find you on LinkedIn.
Here, I'll put my name I'll put my email in the chat. You're welcome. I'd be happy to sit down and talk to you about anything like individually, look at resumes. I'm happy to be a resource for you. Do not hesitate to reach out to me.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much. And good luck with that new job, man. That sounds super fun. Figure out all of our energy independence issues and sort that stuff out, would you?
Yeah, I got you. No stress.
Great. Thanks, guys.